So, good morning. I'd like to continue now from where we left off yesterday concerning which is the fourth empire referred to so frequently in the Tanakh, in the prophets, hinted at in Sefer Bereshit, and also in the words of the sages. And the usual interpretation is that it refers to the four kingdoms, and the first kingdom in the visions is Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. Actually, in both visions in the book of Daniel, both the first vision, which was the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, interpreted by Daniel in the first chapter, the second chapter of Daniel, and then the vision of Daniel directly in the seventh chapter of the four kingdoms, where the first kingdom is Babylon, it's a lion with eagle's wings. The second one is the Medes, the Persians, which is a bear, also an unusual bear. And the third one of Greece is the leopard. And the fourth one, which is the most terrifying animal, which doesn't really exist, so bad, which has got 10 horns, is a reference to the Roman Empire. That is the usual interpretation. And we saw that even Ezra, with a basis also in many midrashim, he says that the leopard, which is the third kingdom, is a combination of the Roman together with the Greeks. But he says, if you try to investigate what's the significance of these four empires, so he says it has to do also with their culture, and with their let's call it their politics. So he says the politics of the Greeks and the Romans are very similar. Alexander the Great also wanted to conquer the world. So there was a great aspect of allowing the small country of Macedonia. Nevertheless, the Greeks want to spread, got to conquer the whole world. And basically they were still idolaters, although many of them came to a more spiritual dimension. And the Romans went back also to apply Greek civilization, but combined with power politics. And Western civilization generally also is regarded by nearly all historians and philosophers of history as being, the origin basically is regarded as Greek civilization, as it was carried on by Roman civilization and then developed in different ways. So, and it's true that many of them say one of the 10 horns, sort of Sadyagon says there's 10 horns, all really a part of the Romans, represented by this terrible beast. And one of the horns is also Islam, but not that Islam is more than that. Ibn Ezra says no. He says Rome and Greece are taken together as a third, and the fourth is Islam. And we also have many indications in the Midrashim and the Zohar, also in the Rambam, and also in other medieval deep thinkers like Rabbi Bechaya, that the worst of all the kingdoms is not Rome. The worst is Ishmael, and that's going to take over. And it's referred to Rabbi Chaim Vital as the fifth kingdom, which, however, is different to the others. But the Rambam also brings it that it's more severe than anything else. And there are also hints for this in Hezkel and in the book of Tehillim by David HaMelech. So I'll just bring you first the prophecy at Bilom, which you referred to already, which is one of the most express illustrations of the coming of the Mashiach and what would precede it. And the Ramban, like others, he goes deeply also into identification between the names that are mentioned and the different forces in human history. He was a great historian, the Ramban. And I suppose you all know of the famous dispute between the Ramban and Fra Pablo, who was a Jewish apostate, went over to Christianity and became a priest, and he was one of the biggest missionaries in the time of the reign of Ferdinand Isabella, the time of the Spanish Inquisition. And they decided that they want to make a debate. You've heard of this? Called the disputation, it's called. Vikuach. And we've got actually a very interesting book which brings in not the true disputation, we've got also a translation of the true disputation. And you find it also, let's say, in the Diaspora Museum, there's even an exhibition of it. And it's well recorded exactly what took place, because it was in front of the king and queen. And who won the debate? Ramban won the debate. And that was impossible for them to allow to happen. So they said the only way, really, Ramban, many of the priests and others said, well, we can't allow him to win the debate, we'll have to get rid of him. We'll have to kill him. But Ferdinand himself, they said to him, they knew he was a great man, and they said, we have to banish you from the country. And that brought him where? To where?
Israel.
So he came to Eretz Israel. And he came to Yerushalayim. There weren't many people, many Jews there at all, but he collected a few Jews and founded the Kehillah in Yerushalayim. And until today, in the old city, which is the oldest remnant of a synagogue? Which synagogue? Ramban synagogue. It's got some stones which were originally built by the Ramban in his time. Anyway, the Ramban's view is, and he was of course concerned with, he knew this inside out, it's brought in his commentary on the Chumash, that Rome continuation was Christianity. I mean, it goes together, it's part of Western civilization, they were Christianity. And in his time, there was also, already a few hundred years from the rise of Islam. But he didn't think Islam could be compared in its power, its extent, either in quantity or quality, to the power of the Roman Empire. And also that's who interpreted all the cases in the Chumash, and which hint at this, and everything in the Tanakh and the prophets. But what will happen before the Mashiach comes, it will be the downfall of the aftermath of the Roman Empire. I suppose all of you know about the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. One of the greatest historians of all times was Gibbon's. That's the most famous book. He showed how the inner corruption and immorality brought the downfall. But nevertheless, what succeeded? The Holy Roman Empire. That continued. The Holy Roman Empire with its centre in Rome, Catholic Church, which was the most widely accepted interpretation of Christianity for many centuries, until later other aspects of it were developed. And so he says he cannot agree with what Ibn Ezra says. So therefore he says like this, that he said Ibn Ezra has confused the matter. he first explains all the hints also in the prophecy of Bilam. They fit in with what is known concerning the development of the Roman Empire and the Byzantine Empire, which is part of the an extension of the Roman Empire. But Rabbi Avraham ibn Ezra confused this matter and introduced the kingdom of Ishmael, the Arabic kingdoms of his times, for their fear was fallen upon him. Because he knew them well. And so he says, he thought Greece and Rome should become the third beast, and the fourth beast will then be the Islamic Empire of his times. And the Ramban rejects this totally. This argument of Ibn Ezra, Ramban says, stems from a lack of knowledge. For each of the four kingdoms Daniel saw gained power one after the other, and each one prevailed over its predecessor and seized the kingdom of the world from it. Likewise, each one continued the enslavement and exile of Israel during the period that it ruled. The main concept of the kingdoms, which is already hinted at in the first vision given to Avraham Avinu, is that these great powers, there was one aspect that their main enemy was the existence of the Jews. And this has been repeated until today. Why should the huge powers have such a hatred against the Jews, who are always a very small minority compared to their power? I mean, even the Hellenists, or Alexander the Great, he was a big conqueror, also trying to extend his power over the whole then inhabited world. At the same time, he's a disciple of Aristotle. So he did recognize there's such a thing as the world of the spirit. And that's why he was very kind to the Jews. That's why many Jews until today are called Alexander, till today. Because he was very kind to the Jews. He saw this great culture amongst the Jews. And Aristotle had the same view. In fact, he hints in many of his writings that the source of all wisdom, just like the alphabet, comes from the Hebrew people. So therefore but his successors were basic idolaters, and they were as cruel as the Romans later on, as we know also from Hanukkah, as part of the Hellenist Empire. Therefore, you can't make this. It's very similar also to Christian anti-Semitism. In fact, the Christian anti-Semitism which connected itself also with the powerful nations. They persecuted the Jews, the Crusaders, and it's a similar type of approach. And Purim is connected more with Persia. It's a different approach. But all these four empires, they see the greatest enemy of the Jewish people. Ishmael sees its enemy particularly in the rulership over this land, of Eretz Israel. But in any case, he argues, I'll go on to bring you the Ramban, in Parshas Balak, he says that Daniel saw in his dream that the Babylonians would be the first to enslave us. That means after the destruction of the temple, with the destruction of the first temple. After them, the Persians would seize the kingdom and would continue to enslave us together with the Medians. After them, there said, will come the Greeks, and after them, the Romans. And they would subjugate us until the time of the end, until the Acharit HaYamim, of the exile, for their kingdom would only come to an end by the hand of the Mashiach. So the extent of our exile is the duration of the rule of the four kingdoms, Babylon, Persia, Greece and Rome. And even if there be other empires in the world at the same time with these four kingdoms, the Tanakh does not count them, and Dan did not see them in his visions, did not have to see them in order to know the date of the final redemption. It's true that there's even reference in the Tanakh to many other countries that are further afield. And indeed, in the days of the kingdoms of Persia and Greece, and today also, there are great empires in the world, besides those of Rome and Ishmael, such in India, Ethiopia, Romania, the Tartars and others. And if so, Ibn Ezra should have counted many kingdoms. Another reason why it is mistaken is that it's well known it was the Romans who exiled us in the days of Vespasian and Titus, and not the Ishmael, not the Arabs. Then wherever we are, whether under Ishmael or anywhere from India even unto Ethiopia, we're in the exile of Rome, until a memory will be destroyed and we shall be redeemed from it. Who knows, perhaps the kingdom of Ishmael will still be destroyed before the coming of the Mashiach. But the fourth beast is the one who exiled us. I beheld on the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them. So the same horn, the horn is the one of Rome, we shall remain in this exile to the coming of the Mashiach. As it is written, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High, and the time came, and the saints possessed the kingdom under the Mashiach. And anyone who understands the visions of Daniel will find this interpretation clearly indicated. For in the second vision, Daniel saw the pushing ram, which explains the kingdom of Persia, and the rough he-goat is the king of Greece, and the great horn is the first king, Alexander of Greece, who prevailed over Persia. When he was strong, his kingdom was broken. In the place thereof four stood up. This was four generals. When Alexander died, his big empire was divided amongst four chief Hellenistic kings, Ptolemy, Seleucid, Antigonus, and Lysimachus, who reigned in his stead after his death. And he said in the Tanakh, out of one of them come forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great, toward the south and toward the east, and toward the beauteous land. That's the beauteous land is the land of Israel. And it says concerning it, yes, it magnified itself even to the prince of the host, and from him the continual burnt offering was taken away. This clearly refers to the kingdom of Rome, which came out of Greece. Because Kittim referred to Babylon, that refers to the Romans, but really the Kittim were the sons of Yavon. Yavon is like Ionia, one of the old names for Greece. Ionia is Yavan, mentioned now. He's the ancestor of the Greeks. And the Kittim were to some extent descended even from them. But the big power was a different one. And the kingdom of Rome removed the continual burnt offering when they destroyed the second temple. Therefore he called the Greece and Rome one beast, one being the rough he-goat, and one of the four horns, wax exceeding great, and removed the continual burnt offering, that's Rome. So actually these are proofs brought by Ibn Ezra that they're really related one to the other. And therefore he says that both the Greek and the Romans should be considered the leopard. It means the third power. There are further such proofs there in the book of Daniel. The fourth kingdom means the Romans, and the tradition of our rabbis. The fourth beast, kingdom of Rome, does not really need support because it's explained by the sages. So, the truth is that the Rambam says, with regard to all that the sages say, and also all that the prophets say, concerning the future of mankind, and concerning the way it's going to be, the wars of Gog and Magog, which are referred to a few times in the Tanakh, we'll only understand their true meaning when they happen. So we have a big divide, and I think we can say that the Ibn Ezra's view is become true. That's what's happening. I mean, we see today the huge conflict between the East and the West. The Iranian threat is also like an aspect, certain aspect, which is closely related to Islam. The religion is slightly different, but still, it's still basically an Islamic religion. And they're preparing themselves today for a world war against the West. We also find the same, what's happening today with the most extreme, even I would say, that even a mania Much of its world is being led by such movements of hate and murder. It's being part of a lifestyle that we see this big confrontation. The Western world still believes in certain basic moral principles, a bit external, but still it keeps the Western world still with some concepts of the liberal democracy, whilst the Muslim world is being taken over by the extremists. So we see this huge battle, and certainly it's the greatest threat today to the future not only of Israel but of the Jewish people. So we see this happening. So in the light of this, I think we have to also at least take into consideration the view of the Ibn Ezra, which is also hinted at in many sayings of the sages. Also connected with this is the way in which Greek and Roman civilization are interrelated, which is shown by Hanukkah. So, in view of all this, we now want to make a start on this sheet here brought to you concerning analysis of Hanukkah. And it's very interesting, the Maral. I've explained who the Maral was. The Maral was one of the greatest giants of Jewish thought. You can say like this, in learning Gemara, there are also a few ways of learning Gemara. And the one which is, let's say, on the highest level, is to understand the way of thinking of the Gemara, is to try to understand the basic principles. It's called like the Derech HaIyon. Now the Derech HaIyon is like this. The Gemara is filled with so many different halachot and agadot. Now in the world of halakha, if one wants to understand halakha well, one has to look at the general principles that bring out all the details. It's like, we know sometimes a huge forest, because of the largeness of the forest, you don't see the trees. It's because there's so many trees, you don't see the forest. There's so many trees, you don't know there's a forest. The same also applies. There's klal uprat, which we say also in the morning. Klal uprat is the general principle and the details. Often, you can only understand the details if you have in mind the general principles. And this is shown in the early commentaries who work on this, the phrases, and it's also shown by the school of thought developed in the major Yeshivat to try to understand the general principle underlying halakha. Now, in the field of Agadah, where there are also many different statements and many different opinions, there to understand the general principle is not so simple. In halakha also not so simple, in Agadah it's even more difficult. But the Maral was one who went to the general basic principles that underlie all aspects of Aggadic material, and wrote many books. And this is shown also in his analysis of Hanukkah. But before going to Hanukkah, he goes on the question of the Hanukkah deals with a conflict between Hellenism and Judaism, between the light of Torah and the so-called enlightenment of Hellenism. And he demonstrates that really, like it's inherent in Ibn Ezra, that Hellenism is a thin veneer of spirituality, but still all the light they brought to the world is still governed by materialism. So he begins by giving here, the sheet you've got in front of you, is really the beginning. It's just a translation of what I read out to you yesterday, of the vision of the four animals, the four beasts, from Daniel chapter 7, from verse 2 to verse 7. So I'm not even going to paraphrase it for you. But I want to carry a few more words, if you want to follow in the Hebrew, of V'yesh lish'al. It's quite good, you have to give you sheets, you please make your notes, you can ask a question. Ke'elu dar malchuyot, Shem et Hashem, these 4 empires which Hashem has brought into his world, ein safek, it is no doubt, shelo yukach mamikre. They were not just by chance. In other words, many of us think, what is history? What is the life of mankind? Is it just happenings in random manner? And when a person, and often even if you've got taken courses in human history, they often ask you, what are the causes of the war? What are the causes? They generally like to go behind, what are the causes that bring about changes in history? And generally speaking, that's what he says, there are many who will say, well, history is a combination of human choice and also acts of God. Even someone doesn't, I use the word acts of God, things that they can't really explain. Nobody can explain. Because that's how it's used in general descriptions. I mean, if it's kind of a volcano, or there's a storm, or tsunami, these are acts of God. Yeah. Human beings don't want it. Or tornadoes, who wants a tornado? Yeah. And but what happens amongst human beings? Also, many things happen to human beings. People live, people die, a king rises, a king falls, an empire. But there's human choice also. They'll all agree, there's human decisions, how people react to situations. So he says something to follow. We know there have been empires, civilizations have risen and fallen. All types, all over the world. It's quite true that if you take the 4 empires of Daniel, as the Ramban already says, there are also things happened in China, things happened in Japan, which are not discussed in the Bible. And so the question is, why these? Why are these discussed? And the others just mentioned by the side, it mentioned other nations. Horovitz, I mean, the big empires had an influence in on the Far East. But still, the development of the Far East empires is not described. Why? Because the Torah concentrates upon those who have a relationship with the people of Israel. Why the people of Israel? Because that's the people that is universal people. That is the people that's been sent to give direction to the world, and bring it to the level as described by the prophet in the time of the Messiah. That's what mankind could be. Mankind could be much greater than the beast. But mankind's been given freedom of choice. And freedom of choice means, like it says by Cain in heaven, it's how individuals react to extreme conflicts and what result it has. And from the individuals it spreads to nations, and from nations it becomes an international situation which can lead to peace or lead to war, lead to construction or destruction. But the Tanakh is based, the whole Tanakh is based that God is the ruler of the world. But not that everything is in the hands of God. You know, this is the basic, without this basic principle you can't understand anything. We say God is the master of the world, but as it says in the beginning of the Chumash, Asher bara Elokim lasot. God created the world that man should complete it. Man is here for tikkun ha'olam. As we say in our prayers daily. The world has to be put right. Human beings are given freedom. Freedom to destroy. It says, see, I set before you life and virtue, and death and vice. Which one do you want to choose? We're given a choice. So that's the choice in front of all mankind. Because it's in our hands. But how is it shown in our hands to the people of Israel? It's not that we're not ordinary special people. We're just like other human beings. But we've been given a heritage. starting with Avram Avinu. Before Avram Avinu, it was left for all mankind. Hashem saw mankind's not doing it as a whole, so therefore Avram chose him, and Hashem chose Avram, and made him the teacher of mankind. And who's willing to follow him? In the end, love and justice will cover the earth. Those who oppose it, it goes through a lot of difficulties. In the end, they'll learn that if you want to survive, you have to accept it. That's human history. So therefore he says, why did Hashem make these 4 kingdoms, these 4 empires, that they should rise to a great height, and they should try to annihilate the Jewish people and the Jewish mission, and then disappear? Why did he do this? This is the order of the world, which Hashem brought. So why there were 4? What does it give? Because that's clear, there are 4 in the visions of Daniel. It goes into in detail. So you'll see, when Hashem created the world, He already hinted at these 4 kingdoms. You want to look at the first page of the Chumash, or the Bible you've got in front of you, first page. And the second verse says, Bereishit bara Elokim, and being God created heaven and earth. Then it says, Va'aretz hayta tohu vavohu. Now here I want to say there's also a deep explanation, which is quite acceptable in Jewish tradition. The first verse speaks about the creation of time and space. Bereshit is time, Shamayim is the universe, the outer universe, the expanding, the huge space, which is infinite. Shamayim, Va'aretz, is what's called Aretz Ratz. It's the moving globe. They're all written in the word. If you go deep to the Hebrew language, it expresses an approach, a scientific approach. In other words, there have been people who thought that the biblical picture of the Bible is the earth stands still. But it already says in the Zohar, in our ancient Midrashim, why is it called Oretz? Aleph is always the central point. Ratz, Ratz is to run. The earth is in constant motion. Yeah? It looks as though the sun rises, sun sets, but the truth is, both are in motion. But according to modern science, but certainly the earth is not stationary. Everything moves on the earth, and the earth itself moves. Ratz, it's running. The second verse says, the earth had been tohu vavohu. So first I'll give you the interpretation. Not everybody knows, but it developed very well in the book The Challenge by a former partner in the Yeshivat, Rabbi Carmel, and one of the greatest scientists, Professor Dom. So there they bring all the texts well known from the Zohar and from ancient Midrashim, and also it's the same idea they developed also by a famous scholar called Velikovsky, who put forward some anti-evolutionary theories, which were, of course, because of that, they weren't accepted at the time when this was dogmatic, but they returned to be true from many different sources, that there were many catastrophes that took place on this earth, and also in the surrounding planet. And here the Chumash, it hints at it, and as the Midrash says, Va'aretz hayta tohu vavohu, the earth had been in a state of chaos. So it's a reference to pre-existing situations on this globe. But perhaps we'll speak more about this next year. This one's waiting already. So I'd like you to keep this sheet and then we'll continue.